Welcome into the Main Event Broadcasting Network as we are joined today by Piedmont head women's basketball coach Jamie Purdy to talk a little bit about the upcoming 2015-2016 basketball season. Well, Coach, we appreciate you joining us here on the Main Event Broadcast Network. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We know you're in the throes of preseason practice, so a lot of time on the court. Appreciate you taking a few minutes to step away as we talk a little bit about the upcoming 2015-2016 season. We're going to talk a lot about returners and key additions as well on the court for your team as well. But before we talk new faces on the court, let's talk about the new faces on the bench. One of those, Brad Cochran, new assistant coach for you. Local high school coach, spent a lot of time in the area, kind of knows a lot of the recruiting realm. He'll know the landscape. What does he bring to your coaching staff here?
Well, first of all, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to have a full-time assistant.
Right.
I think that alone impacts our program immensely. Brad's already been on the road a lot more than we have been in the past, just simply because he is full-time and I can be at practice while he's on the road. It's hard doing that with the graduate assistant sometimes. But Brad has a background in player development. He does a lot of lessons and things of that nature, and I think that's pretty important for any program to have somebody that can have that one-on-one or give that one-on-one attention to some players and develop a good relationship with them. So he brings that as well as a lot of energy and balance to me. And I think that speaks highly of him. The players are excited to have him on the bench.
And last season, you already have a good base to build off of. Brad comes into a good season here. 19-7 you were overall last season. 11-5 in the USA South, and tied for second in the South Division of the league. So a very good season overall. How are you looking to try to make things work here in 2015-2016 to make it a third straight trip to the postseason?
We've got to take one game at a time. I think we started off really well last year, and then, come January, things started getting really tough, getting into the conference play and a lot of travel, and so my focus right now is just taking one game at a time, trying to get those days off and make sure those girls get rested. So come tournament time, we're not ready to pack our bags and go home.
I understand that. One game at a time. That's usually kind of the typical answer we get here from a lot of coaches, so yeah. That's no problem there. You bring back a lot of key talent, key contributors, especially a senior trio. Mary Kate Rushton, Taylor Suzowski, LaShonda Jones. They're three of your top four scorers from last season. What does it mean to have them returning, not just as key returners for you, but seniors now, leadership they bring to the table, and how are you going to kind of put that all together?
I think they're pretty excited about their senior year. On the academic side, they're all kind of, closing things up on the academic realm. I mean, Mary Kate's a nursing major, so things are really tough for her, but I think the worst is behind her. Same thing with LaShonda. She's a biology major, so a lot of her lab classes and stuff are out of the way. Swaz will be doing her student teaching here soon, so a lot of that academic pressure is out of the way, and I think they're really excited about, basketball and just finishing on a strong note.
Yeah, it's always so tough when they get to their last 2 years, especially academically, and here as well. It's so challenging academically, but they really have been key to your team, especially last year as juniors. We're looking for the same thing for them as seniors. A lot of new faces, though, to the Lady Lions, too. It's been just a few weeks of preseason. You've had a couple practices, kind of scrimmages, that kind of thing, to put some things together. Are there any new faces that are standing out to you that may be key contributors here in the early months, especially?
I think it's still really early for us to tell right now. We've had a couple of scrimmages, but we were able to get a lot of the kids in. Really, everybody had an opportunity to get on the court, and we saw a lot of good things. I think a lot of it just really depends on how these returners, the seniors and junior class, quite honestly, are really strong, and so it really depends on how those pan out. We have a local kid, Jalen Davis, who was able to do a lot of good things in the scrimmage, our latest scrimmage. Our point guard, Brianna Barrett, was out. Sophomore Bridget Kelly really didn't get much playing time last year, but she really stepped in and took Brianna's spot during that scrimmage. So there's a lot of sophomores as well as freshmen that will be able to step up this year, I believe. Yeah,
some faces we saw last year, of course, on the court for your team, but some new faces definitely have been added to the mix. One of the things they're going to get used to early on is road trips. The schedule's front-loaded with a lot of away games. That tends to be kind of a good thing, though, sometimes for teams. The road trips and the away games against a tough crowd or maybe a tough environment tend to galvanize the team together. For a team looking for chemistry, of course, too, is you're adding a lot of new faces to a very veteran group. I'm sure that's kind of be one thing on your mind here as we go on through the early part of the season. Talk a little bit about the early portion of the schedule. It's highlighted by some big trips, one to Fort Lauderdale for a tournament, a USA South, SAA kind of challenge a little bit in Atlanta. Talk a little bit about the schedule, the early part of the schedule especially.
I wouldn't say that it's the best schedule that I've put together as far as the travel and stuff's concerned. You see our schedule card with our home events on there, and everybody asks, is that it? But like you mentioned, we have a couple tournaments, or 3 different tournaments actually, where there's 4 games each in those. And so we had several games that we owed another school, a contest at their place. Emory, for example, Salem is another. So we start off on the road a lot. And I believe it'll help kind of get out those first game jitters. We bring a pretty packed house here at Piedmont, and so hopefully if we can kind of get on the road and get those first games underway, that we'll put on a pretty good show at our place.
Well, and I know one department that's not necessarily terribly disappointed that you're on the road, and that's your sports information department.
I'm
no
sure,
home events.
I'm sure.
Earlier on, gets a little bit used to, a lot of key changes in the rules and that kind of stuff as far as the women's game too. So it's going to take a little bit of getting used to for everybody involved, especially the home fans.
Coaching staff as well. I think the changes there are completely changing the game of basketball, it seems. There's a lot of adjustments for sure.
Yeah, and that'll be something that the home fans will have to get used to. A lot of home games in January and February in the conference portion of the schedule too as well. How important will that be for your team to have those games at home, especially within conference play, as you look to make a run at the USA South title? And what are kind of some other key factors as you guys try to make a title run?
Well, like you mentioned, January, February, a lot of conference games. I think we have 2 in December, which really kind of goes back to your last question regarding the schedule of being on the road in the beginning. We have a limited amount of time that we have to get those games in out of conference. Right. And so that's really why we're on the road a lot. But, come January, February, there's no time for rest. I mean, it is back to back. I think it will be nice to have a lot more games at home during that time, because you get worn down, you know, when a lot of people are a lot of programs are at home over Thanksgiving break for maybe a week or a few days, and even Christmas break, 2-3 week break. We're here working hard for with only a couple of days off. So come January and February, you get burnt out a little bit, and I think that's a big thing for us here, as well as the men. We just try and keep those kids rested and focused as much as possible, and having those home events where we have our crowd and our support, it'll be nice.
Yeah, it's been a great home following over the last couple of years, especially with a lot of the local kids like Brianna. You mentioned Carly Sales, both Habersham Central graduates, so they bring a lot of fans, of course, to the arena. It's been a great atmosphere. Coach, we're looking forward to it when you do get at home here very soon.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for joining us here in the Main Event Broadcasting Network, as we sat down with head women's basketball coach Jamie Purdy to talk a little bit about the upcoming 2015-2016 women's basketball season. It all starts this Thursday for the Lady Lions, November 19th, as they take on local rival Toccoa Falls College at 7 p.m. Tip-off for the home portion of the season here on the Main Event Broadcasting Network comes at 7 p.m. on December 15th against North Carolina Wesleyan College in USA South Conference play. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.